Good morning, everyone. It's 11 o'clock, and we usually have some stragglers coming in, so we'll just start and they can join us in progress. My name's Eric Story from the Edmonton Pride Seniors Group. It's June 1st, and thank you all for attending our weekly Aging with Pride discussion group for the 2S LGBTQ plus seniors and allies. And thank you too for our partners at SAGE and the Pride Center of Edmonton. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to acknowledge that we're located on Treaty 6 territory and respect the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada whose presence continues to enrich our lives. Two housekeeping items. First, I'd like to caution you that today's session is being recorded, and that if you would prefer that your image not be used, please turn off your camera. And secondly, we want our weekly meetings to be a safe space. So I'd like to remind you of a couple of things. Please respect our speakers by remaining muted during the talk. We'll unmute you for the Q&A following the presentation. And please be mindful of time limitations to keep your questions and comments as brief as possible. And lastly, please respect the confidentiality of personal information. Okay, so the Men's Shed initiative began in Australia in the 1990s and has spread around the world. The aim of Men's Sheds is to improve the health and well-being of their members by creating connections. And today we're delighted to have two very strong advocates joining us. Punch Jackson, who retired in 2009 after a long career of community and public service. In his early career, he worked at the YMCA in Winnipeg in camping and outdoor education. He has been a private consultant and spent 30 years with Alberta's public service. He worked in many areas of the public service, including recreation, sport, community development, the voluntary sector, the Wild Rose Foundation, and Alberta's public libraries. Punch has been actively advocating for men's sheds in Alberta since 2013. He's a chairman of the Men's Shed Association of Edmonton, that was created as an umbrella group to help promote and support men's sheds in the Edmonton area. Amanda is a community animator for SAGE Seniors Association. Using an intentional community development approach, she assists seniors in finding a place for their skills and wisdom to be utilized, connecting them with activities, opportunities, and resources in their area. She has a passion for community building and enjoys being involved in community activities and initiatives that promote neighborliness, encourages connections, and fosters wellness and inclusion. She's been involved with both the Beverly Historical Society and the Beacon Heights Community League, and is a neighborhood block connector for the Abundant Community Edmonton Program. She became involved with the Men's Shed initiative in 2016 and continues to contribute to its growing popularity in Edmonton as a non-programmatic, friendly grassroots environment for men of all ages and abilities. Okay, that was all of my duty, and now Punch and Amanda, over to you. Very happy to have you here.
Thanks very much for having us. Should I pull up this screen now?
Sure. There we are.
Okay. I'll get my cursor out of the way here. Well, thank you very much for asking us. As Eric said, Amanda and I have been working on men's sheds here in Edmonton for a number of years. I was on a trip to Winnipeg a number of years ago, and I met up with the fellow who started men's sheds in Canada, Doug Mackey. And it didn't take very long before he was telling me to get my butt back to Edmonton and start some sheds. So it was an interesting process to start with, finding people to be our ambassadors was a bit of a challenge. Let's see, why isn't this moving forward? There we go. So the first person that I really connected with in the city of Edmonton was Scott McKean, who had just been elected as a councillor. And I went to Scott because he had a new portfolio that had to deal with mental health and social isolation. I told him about men's sheds, and within 5 minutes, he was on it. He was supportive of it, and he connected the men's shed group to the process that was just starting, which was the Living Hope suicide prevention strategy. And in that strategy, Scott was able to get us a part of a sentence in the final report that said, men's sheds are a promising practice for suicide prevention. So that was where it started. And I guess now we loop back and say, well, what is it? What is it that this promising practice was? And it's quite simple. Men's sheds are a safe space where men can get together. And the primary purpose of men's sheds, as Eric said, is to focus on the health and well-being of men. That does not exclude women, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But the simplest men's shed is a place where there's a coffee pot, a table, and 2 or 3 guys. The story of how this all started back in Australia in the 1990s was that Australia was going through an economic downturn, much the same as what happens in Alberta, the roller coaster effect in their economy. And in this particular downturn, people started to see a dramatic rise in men with depression, and the suicide rate in Australia for men spiked. And men began to retreat into themselves and just sort of backed away. So there was, to sort of counteract what was happening, the government sponsored community sessions. And in these community sessions, the families were given some skills to try to cope with the downturn and cope with depression. In one of these sessions, it was run at a little college. A woman was hired to conduct the workshops. So first week, she was happy as heck. In come a whole raft of people. Oops, they're all women. The place was filled with women. Second week, same story. So at the end of the second week, the instructor sort of was following the women out into, as they were leaving and chatting with them. And she got out onto the front step of the facility, and she looked out as the women sort of dispersed out into the parking lot where there were cars everywhere. I don't know, the cars had men in them, and said, what's going on? Why are these guys all sitting in the car? Why aren't they coming inside? I'm a great they should be just they don't want to be they don't want to show that they have issues. They don't want to talk about their issues. Oh, She
Your
said to him, "Well,
internet
you
is
got any
unstable right
suggestions?"
now for the moment. Um, Amanda, maybe could you take over for a minute until Punch's internet sort of stabilizes?
What's happening here?
Sorry, Punch, you're breaking up a bit.
Am I?
Yes.
What if I get closer here?
What about if you turn off your video and just talk? Because we can still see the screen. That might help with your internet a bit.
Me turn off my video? Okay.
Like turn off your video, but we can still see your screen.
Okay. So anyway, week 3 comes along and the women rush in and they're all in the class, and the caretaker slips around to the front of the building and he goes to the parking lot and waves to the guys and says, "Hey, I got a project I need some help with. Can you guys help me?" So the guys all get out of the cars and follow the caretaker around to the back of the building and inside into this guy's workshop. And there he's got a few projects for them to work on. And all of a sudden, the guys are all talking to each other. So, end of the day, everybody goes home. Week 4 comes along. The women go in the front door, and the men all go around to the back door where the coffee is. Coffee's up. In the meantime, the instructor and the caretaker had put up some posters around the workshop for messages, which have now become known as health by stealth. So there were some posters about violence against women. There were posters about prostate cancer. There were different health-related posters about getting your annual checkup, things like that. And the guys all started coming back to the workshop. And even after the session was over, the workshops were over, the men would come every week to the workshop. And that was the beginning of the first men's shed in Australia. The reason for men going to the men's shed, up on the screen, you can see that there's all kinds of cases where men are lonely. They could be in apartments. They could be they could have lost their spouse. They could be new to the city. There's all kinds of reasons. They need friends. And men's sheds, as Scott McKean pointed out, it's a preventative initiative for suicide, because we don't want to have that situation happening that's on the right of the screen. We want to avoid that as much as possible. Okay, there we go. So the movement for men's sheds has taken off since the late 1990s. And in Australia, they now have over 1,200 sheds. And they have more sheds in Australia than they do McDonald's. The initiative spread over to New Zealand. Naturally, the New Zealanders couldn't be outdone by the Australians. And they have over 130 sheds. But what was surprising was that there was a guy who went down to Australia to study what was happening because Ireland was going through a tremendous downturn and unemployment rates had skyrocketed, and exactly the same thing had happened in Ireland as had happened in Australia. And now there are over 450 sheds in Ireland. It's the highest per capita in the world. Scotland, 135, Wales, you can see. Canada has really started this process late. We didn't start the process until 1963 and really didn't get on it for almost 10 years. The Americans are following up with 25 sheds, and then it's in countries like Denmark and the Netherlands, and Iceland actually has 4 sheds. Estonia, I discovered, has 2 sheds, and Poland. And we have an ongoing relationship with a shed in Kenya. And then there's Sweden and Norway. So it's become a worldwide movement. In Australia, it has extremely strong funding from the government, because the government recognized what was happening. They did some studies. They recognized what was happening in the sheds and what the impact was on men, their families, and on their community. And it's been an amazing level of support that they have provided. They've developed a men's health strategy in Australia, and are leading the world with work to support men. So why do these guys go? As I started to tell you, men, I'll start with the retirement piece, that men figure, oh man, once I retire, I am going to just have everything is going to be sweet. I'm going to have my hobbies, I'm going to have my job jar, and it'll be great. That lasts about 2 months. And then all of a sudden they've got time on their hands and they're bored. But the biggest piece of retirement was that for most men, they tend to lose their social network. They may not have built a network outside of the work environment. So this is a really big shock when they find that they don't have as many friends around them as they thought they did. There may be men that are separated, divorced, or their partner has died, and they're on their own. Guys may have, the family may have downsized, the kids are gone, and they move into a smaller, either a facility, or they move into a smaller apartment, and the man loses his workshop, or the space that was dedicated for his meditation, we'll call it, his safe space. There may be people that are new to town and they're looking for friends. And then there's the ongoing men might be underfoot at home, that their wives have been, their home may have been their domain solely for the last 30 years while the husband's been away working. And he's now a pain in the butt because he's hanging around talking to her about how things could be more efficient. Men have skills that they want to share, and there are all kinds of men who have things that they would like to learn. They've never had an opportunity to use tools. There you go, Amanda.
Okay. This is my favorite topic. As the lone female on the board of the Men's Shed Association, I always tell everybody, every good shed needs a great woman. I don't know if I've sold them on it yet, but that's my story. I find this is a very interesting topic when we talk about men's sheds, because of course, when you talk about men's sheds, it typically goes to very gender-focused discussion. Is it for men? Should women be involved? And we need to remember that when we're talking about men's sheds as male spaces, it's really about safe, accepting, supportive spaces. We don't need to necessarily assign genders to where men hang out. However, there's a few things that we like to keep in mind when we're talking about men's sheds. Often we get a lot of backlash that men's sheds are sexist, they're exclusive of women, and we've actually come across funders who won't fund men's sheds because the name men is in the name, and they figure it's an initiative only for men. Now, men's sheds obviously don't just benefit men. They benefit everybody, men, women, children, communities. And so we need to just keep that in mind when we're discussing men's sheds. So should women be involved in men's sheds? Yes. Women play a very important role. women are very mindful of, of ensuring that there's positive healing spaces for those male figures in our lives. And women like me, we work behind the scenes. The Shed Initiative, it's organic, it's community-based, it's a process led by men for men. But the reality is, a lot of men need some support to help discover and embrace this process. And that's where women can come in. Naturally, we are great connectors, we're great motivators. As Punch said, we're the ones that take, guys by the hand and drag them in. I believe it was Larry saying that about the Churchill events. Women understand the importance of building friendships, of having a sense of purpose, connecting to and supporting each other. And we want this for all the men in our lives to have this too. And yes, women, we get our fathers, our husbands, our brothers, our neighbors involved in sheds because it's good for them. And really, if it's good for the men in our lives, it's good for us too. Because when we have a place to send the men in our lives where they come back happy, healthy, stories to share, that has an impact on everybody that those men have connections with. Now, myself, I don't think that women should be attending men's sheds for their own purposes. But this is only because it can sort of upset that intentional structure of the shed. It's not done to exclude women. It's actually done to support men. Because we need to ensure that we have a setting that supports men's health and healing. Usually when I kind of explain this, most people will understand why it's important to keep these spaces male-focused. And that's because socially, women, we tend to take charge. It's how we've been socialized. It's how men have been socialized to allow us to do it. Men act differently when women are present. And when there's usually mixed groups of men and women, most men will try to stick to those traditional identities of masculinity, being strong, in control, not showing vulnerability. And men might not want to open up, and taboo topics relating to men's health or men's issues aren't discussed in a serious way. And really, it's important for men to have these safe healing spaces so that they can be empowered and encouraged to express themselves. And if we allow men to gather in such a setting, it's beneficial to everybody, women, children, communities. And I think we really need to make sure that people realize that the how and why of men's sheds is important, because we need to accept the fact that there are male-focused, safe spaces for men to be open about their health and about their well-being. Benefits of men's sheds. Now, there's been a lot of research done, especially in Australia, because this initiative's been going on there for years. And there's something called the shed effect. What is the shed effect? It's all of the positive outcomes that men say they experience as a result of taking part in a shed. It provides a sense of purpose, creates a sense of pride. People feel valued. They have a sense of belonging. It can enhance resilience. It decreases social isolation. It provides emotional support. It builds friendships. It enhances self-esteem. It can increase happiness. It increases health. So there's so many positive effects. I know our shedders here in Edmonton have reported feeling happier. They feel they've made new friends. They feel their lives have improved because they can be open and they can be honest. And they can have genuine connection and genuine discussions that is not run, you know, it's not structured the way that a male support group would be structured. It's natural, it's organic, it's community based. And as traditional gender roles have shifted, many men have found themselves kind of searching for new ways to connect with their community and to find meaning in their lives. And sheds are really welcoming spaces. Oh, you might want to go back to that other one there, Punch. Sheds are welcoming spaces for men to share their experiences, receive encouragement and advice. I really like this slide because I think it does talk about all the different personalities that you can find in a shed. You know, Terry doesn't like to talk. Phil can't hear too well. There you go, perfect pairing. You know, you can find such a variety of people in a men's shed. There's always somebody that you can connect to on some level. Sorry, Punch. I just wanted to
it's all right.
mention that one. Okay. Various men's sheds activities. We always talk, of course, when we talk about sheds, people say, what happens in a shed? Well, anything happens in a shed. Of the thousands of sheds around the world, you're never going to find two sheds that are the same, because sheds are for men by men. So that particular group of people that are interacting in that space determine what happens in that space. And we always talk about find a meaningful activity. But what is a meaningful activity? It's so varied. Some of the examples that we know of, often it's just, you know, coffee and snacks. Have a coffee, have some conversation, talk about anything and everything. There's a lot of table games. There's, you know, cards, puzzles. Early on the stage of the downtown men's shed, there was a group actually from the Churchill. They loved doing puzzles, which sounds weird. Like why would you want to do a puzzle when you're with a group of guys? But the conversation, it wasn't about the puzzle itself. It was that a puzzle was put on a table and people would come around it, and the conversations that happened were magnificent. Don't know if the puzzle actually ever got finished, but it was about just bringing people together. Sometimes you just need that prop to bring people together. Some of our shedders, they do tours. They do lunch outings. They've done, you know, they've gone to the museums. They've gone to the aviation museums, the art galleries, can be anything. In the picture, you'll notice a bunch of little carved birds in the bottom left. That is from our Cold Lake shed. They create what they call comfort birds. It's a project that's really popular there. So they carve these birds, they're called comfort birds, and then they donate them to one of the local hospices. And they also donate them to long-term care facilities. And they're given to people to hold and to rub. They're nice and soft. Well, it's wood, but it's smooth, so people can rub it. There's all kinds of woodworking. Some of our groups get presenters on a whole bunch of different topics. They could be, you know, historical, they could be health related, anything and everything. Sheds around the world. There's such things as music sheds. It's all about guys creating music, playing music, talking about music, recording music. There's book clubs. There's some that are just about various technology, computers, all that type of thing. Sheds can be whatever it is the guys want it to be. And that's really the beauty of these spaces, is that the people involved decide what is meaningful to them. And often it changes. What might be meaningful in the start of a shed could definitely change and develop and turn into something totally different.
Sometimes the community comes to the shed and asks for support. In the top middle slide there, we were asked to do picnic tables for transitional housing for the homeless. And there was leftover material, and Amanda connected the guys to a group of African women who had built a community garden, but they didn't have any money for benches. So the guys built benches for them. The bottom where the guys are standing around that box with a hole in it, that's an unpainted doghouse for Northern Alberta. And their animal rescue group came to the sheds and asked if we could build some. So there's all kinds of community projects that can be worked on. And so that's another value for the men in terms of them seeing the impact of their contributions in the community.
And usually most of the sheds do have a component of giving back to the community. So this is why they do like to sometimes take on projects. And they can be something big like building. But we also had a group of men who were older who said, I don't want to build anything. Been there, done that. So what they did, they were all retired. They had all been, most of them had been professional businessmen. They had all kinds of suits and clothes that they didn't need anymore. So they got that together and then they donated it to a local charity. So, people can give back in so many different ways. It's really quite remarkable when there's no limits to what people can do.
Just to give you a quick overview of across the country, BC has the most sheds with 30. Alberta, we now have 16 sheds, Manitoba 8, Ontario 8, New Brunswick 1, and we're working with, oddly enough, they came to us here in Edmonton from Tuktoyaktuk to build a shed, have a shed in that community. It's a community of 938 people. Not one family has not had a suicide. So they have a real need for some type of group like Men Sheds. The contact information for us is here. We have the Canadian Men Sheds Canada site. We have an Edmonton website. The guys have an active Facebook page. And if you have questions specifically, you can email to menshedsedmonton@gmail.com. Now, Amanda, have we got any other things that we would like to share?
Just to mention that we currently have 6 sheds in Edmonton and surrounding region. Is that correct, Punch? Are we still at 6 or are we at more now?
6, yes.
6. Various sheds all doing various things. So if you would like to get connected with a shed, check it out, bring someone to check it out, have questions about what's happening, we can certainly connect you to various groups. And if you're interested in talking about what it might look like to start your own shed in a different area where there isn't one, we're always open to stuff like that as well.
The kinds of things that have been talked about during COVID, the downtown guys did over 100 presentations. And it was absolutely amazing, the topics that they covered. They developed a partnership with the University of Alberta, and they helped provide resource people for those presentations. They developed over a month period, they had a partnership project with the Cardiff, Wales Men Shed. And the guys from Cardiff it would be after supper, or around supper time, and it would be early afternoon here in Edmonton. They found all kinds of things that they had in common in terms of coal mining, looking at old artifacts. And they were on a tour of the interpretive center was it Beverly Heights area of Edmonton, where there's a coal mine interpretive center. And they found that to be really, really interesting. There's now a Men Sheds Association for Alberta, and activities in the capital region, we have a shed in Beaumont and a shed just starting up in Spruce Grove. Strathcona County is about to start a shed, and then we have sheds in Edmonton proper. Not all sheds have a workshop, and the two biggest challenges I guess we have are, one is finding leaders to start sheds, and secondly, finding space that's sustainable. And you'd think that would be an easy task in Edmonton when you look around and you see all of the space that's for lease or for rent, but it's still a challenge. People aren't stepping up the way they do in rural Alberta with finding space. So Eric, maybe we should jump into the questions. Let me turn off this screen. How do I do that?
Yep. You stopped sharing. That's perfect, Punch. Thank you so much. And before I just want to share a little story that several years ago we were on a cruise. My sister, myself, and a few friends, and there were several sea days. So the first sea day, my sister said, "Well, there's a knitting group up on the top lounge, so I'm going to go up and join that." And I had read, well, there's a men's reading group also going on. So the first day I went to the men's reading group, and I said, later at dinner, my sister said, "How was it?" And I said, "Well, just a bunch of guys sitting around reading and not talking." She said, "Oh, you should try coming to the knitting group." So the next day I went to the knitting group. I walked in the door, and the steward at the door said, "Oh, the men's reading group is the next floor down." I said, "No, I'm going over there." It was fantastic. The level of conversation, well, of course, all of these kind ladies trying to teach me how to knit, but the conversation that happened just because we were doing something together. And Amanda, I'll stick your phrase in as something that's always stuck in my mind, is that women talk face to face, men talk shoulder to shoulder. And that's the concept that I certainly, well, in the knitting group, women talk shoulder to shoulder, but it was doing something together that sort of brought out the conversation. And for me, it was a fantastic experience. So I just wanted to share that little story. That's what got me interested in men's sheds. And I'll open the floor for questions or comments. You know, if there's no questions, you'll have to endure my interpretive dance. Larry, I see you. Your hand.
Yeah, it may sound like an unusual connection, but I am reminded in the way men's sheds have evolved and their primary purpose, very much in the way that another successful community group with Alcoholics Anonymous has arisen. And the start from the community is so important. But I guess my first question to you is, in how many of your sheds are there openly gay men, and how are they accepted? Is it safe for us? Would it be safe for me, I guess, is my question.
As far as I know, there are 3 sheds that have gay men in them, and they all have had no problems whatsoever.
That's really excellent to hear, because that's a good start. The other part of the issue is, and I was very much involved in setting up sort of what would be the equivalent of a gay shed, that would be sort of like a gay AA group. And it wasn't some of our interests are not stereotypically male. Some of the things that we want to do don't fit terribly well. So is there a place for sort of special interest groups, such as gay men or any other? You alluded to music groups and so on. So I'm guessing the answer is yes.
Yeah, I think it's when we were working in the suicide prevention area, we came one of the groups that was represented were first responders, and they were talking about the men shed concept. And I said, well, okay, would the fellows that have PTSD, would they be interested in integrating into an existing shed, or would they want to be on their own? And they said that for men with PTSD, they would want to be on their own, and that they would want to be with guys that really understood what they had gone through. So we've had lots of people talk about setting up sheds for men with addictions, drug addictions, alcohol, and they understand this the concept so well. We've had men from AA come to us and want to start a shed, but and one of the fellows is he was a carpenter for most of his life, and he's recently retired and started street ministry, and he wanted to start a shed. And my first reaction was, oh, he's going to start something. He's going to start a woodworking shed. And he said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to start a shed that's focused around the kitchen. And so what he had been able to do was access a commercial kitchen in a church in the Strathcona area. And what he wanted to do was to bring the men in off the street, teach them how to cook. But cooking, the test would be cooking to make supper, and then cooking again to make meals for the next day, so that they were able to have to avoid dumpster diving, and to give men that skill, and to again have a place for them to go that was safe. So the range of shed types is it's almost unlimited. We've been talking about the development of what we're calling remote sheds, and this is where you have individuals who are unable to leave their homes, that they have some degree of some handicap of some sort. They can't get out. They can't go to the shed. So to set up, we'll call it a Zoom shed, but that's an interesting process in terms of how do you take a shed experience and bring it to a group of men who are isolated. So we're working with a fellow that's been doing research on this in Australia, because there are thousands of men that are in that situation. And so there's so many different channels for men sheds, but we still are stuck with the key challenges of finding men to step up and lead, and two, to find the space for them to meet.
You know, Larry, I just wanted to add, because you had asked if, sheds would be safe spaces for gay men to go to. Men's sheds are, of course, organic, natural. Some of the sheds around Alberta like to say the rule of the shed is there are no rules, but there are rules. They have to be open, respectful of everybody. And if you can't, if you can't be respectful to everybody else in the shed, you will be asked to leave the shed. That's the one rule that we really strive to attend, is that these are safe, open spaces for everybody. And I only ever once saw one potential issue, but it was nipped in the bud right in the beginning. It was never an issue since. So yeah, just wanted to mention that.
Thank you for that. I'm sure there will be other questions. So
I think now I'm just wondering, do you have a list of the actual Edmonton men's sheds, what days they meet, what time, and that sort of thing? That because I'm thinking it's almost a gay men's shed called Prime Timers, which meets once monthly, and the idea again is just to build social connections. And I think that some of the primetime members, depending on what area of the city the meetings are in, I'd be more than happy to take some information about the men's sheds to prime timers, and maybe even ask one of you to come to one of our meetings when we resume in the fall.
We can give you that list. There is a list of the sheds and the contact person on the website, but we could give you a further list with the date, the days of the week that they meet and the times.
Sure.
So we'll send that to you afterwards.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be happy to circulate it around the folks that I know as well. That would be great. Do you go year round, or do you take a break during the summer? Most of the sheds take a break during the summer, or are they going year round?
Some sheds take a break in the summer, but there are others that they may just reduce the number of times they meet.
Okay. Other questions, folks? Joan, go ahead.
So do the men's sheds, are they literally standalone place, or can you just like start a men? Is there a standard? Do you need a building with a bathroom or what?
You want to take that one?
Yeah, you sort of broke up a little bit there, Joan, but I think what you're asking is there a specific space where a men's shed has to?
Yeah, like if you started a men's shed somewhere, do you need a space, or can you just host it wherever, say the men's shed is going to be in so-and-so's basement or something? Or does it need to be, like, it's not part of the rule of the program, you need an actual standalone space?
The rule of men's sheds is there is no rule. No, a men's shed can be anywhere. Usually we try to, the only thing we say is try to make it a place that is accessible, that is inclusive. But if there's guys that, and actually we have a couple groups that are in the early stages of forming a men's sheds, and it's a guy who opens his garage door, and the guys go in there and they, shoot the breeze and talk about plans and what could be, what could not be, what it might be. There's sheds, we have some sheds that happen in community league spaces. We have a couple sheds that, began in long-term care facilities. We've had, or seniors organizations. We've had sheds that are other groups that would host a space. Some sheds, we had one pre-pandemic. They were struggling with space. So that particular group, they always met at the same coffee shop at the same time every week, got their usual table, had their talk, had their discussion. It can be whatever it is that the guys want it to be.
Right. So you can use a community hall and places like that, or say a library, public library meeting. Yeah. Okay, thanks. I think it's a great idea. It is different having a group of certain people and the openness. I've found that over the years with different groups I've attended, and yeah, it's nice sometimes just to have, a specific group, but not exclusive, but for the purpose of supporting that group. So I like it. I think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I live fairly close to Bonnie Doon Mall, and in the food court there, every time I'm walking to go through to Safeway or the Shoppers Drug or whatever, you'll always see groups of seniors sitting together and having coffee. And I always wonder, it's these people who have probably known each other for several years, and they decided we'll get together for coffee on Tuesday mornings or something like that. And that's great for people that already have a network. But how do you start to build a network for people that don't have one, or whose network is slowly shrinking, and they realize that they need to start to add some more human capital to their network. So this is, to me, a men's shed is an ideal situation. Michael, you're a community activist. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm embarrassed to say that one of the sheds in Central actually asked me to attend one of the meetings and chat kind of thing, and we the first time we tried the setup, this was during COVID, it didn't work on Zoom, and somehow the person organizing it wasn't able to get the other people on. So we picked another date, which I wrongly put in my calendar, kind of thing. And so when the second date came, I wasn't there. And then, so I apologized and said, well, maybe sometime, but I haven't heard anything, but I didn't go any further either after that. It was all, and it was during COVID time, the kind of thing as well. It would have been, a Zoom meeting kind of thing that as well.
They're still looking forward to your comments, Michael.
Yeah?
They're still looking forward to your comments.
Oh, yeah, and I haven't done anything to try to reinstate that. And so easy for me to say that it's the kind of thing that I just don't get to too often, and myself is just the problem of getting back at it, because I'm certainly still interested in doing that. But in terms of pulling together a group, I do think that has been mentioned. It oftentimes starts to happen because you run into some other people a little bit. I mean, in some ways, when we started what is now the Edmonton Pride Senior Group, it was a couple of us saying, let's pull a couple of other folks, and there were about 4 or 5 of us that sat down and talked about it, sitting around a table. And we sat around a table at Sage, because I was on the board there, and it was easy for me to get a space there to do that kind of thing, and that as well. And it evolved into something different than it wasn't strictly men, and it wasn't strictly a shed, but it did evolve by that beginning, and then others pulling folks. And the 2 of us that started it said each of us said we need to bring at least 1, if not 2, other people we know with us, so that we had that 4 or 5 people kind of thing, that too. So it's another way of, if a couple of the men are interested, whether they can help build that network by bringing another 1 or 2 who probably know somebody else that they eventually, if you bring a couple others, they probably know somebody else that they can bring eventually as well, and that. But reaching out to folks that are isolated, it can be it's a challenge, as I think most people know, and I think that it only happens if you intentionally work at finding people that are isolated or lonely, and that that's they turn up at different places where they are. But I have nothing further to add. That was my little background story on it.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh, that's fine.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, Bill.
Is there a website that contains a links to other websites around Edmonton of men's sheds that we could have here in the chat, and also put on the YouTube page when we get it up there?
I'll see if I can put up the
And if you Google men's sheds, first you're going to get 20 places of where to buy a shed. Yes. But then you will see the Men's Shed Canada site, the Edmonton site, the Australian site, the Scottish site. There's all kinds of resources out there. There's actually 2 books that have been published as well, all about the men's shed movement. Those ones are mostly research done in Australia. I think both of them are by Barry Golding. But yeah, there's lots of information out there, and yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, there you go. There's our website.
Yeah.
So there's some on that website. There are some other websites that you can connect to all over the world. But if you just type in a Google search, Mensheds, you'll, as Amanda said, you'll get to some pretty neat places.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, and I had asked earlier if Punch is going to send me some more information, which I'll send out to the folks that are here. I don't think you had signed on at that point, Bill. So yeah, I'll forward on any information that I get. Listen, it's 5 to 12, and we want to respect everybody's time and end promptly at 12. So first thing, and I do have a few announcements about upcoming events, but before that, I'd just like to ask Punch and Amanda if you have any final comments before we start wrapping it up.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Amanda?
I believe, just if anyone is interested, I believe our next shed, the downtown shed, would be meeting tomorrow afternoon, 1 p.m. at the Churchill. So if anybody happens to be downtown tomorrow and wants to pop in, I believe that's an in-person meeting.
We'll also be on Churchill Square, I think June 8th for Seniors Day. Mensheds will have a tent there. So if you want to pop by and shoot the breeze, glad to see you.
Good. Well, thank you.
At the 1 p.m. in the Churchill, the main floor space. Is that correct, tomorrow?
Yes, in the main floor space, 1 p.m.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And before we sign off, I'd like to remind everybody that next week we're going to have Lori Winder, who's going to talk about her experience of trying to select the proper retirement residence for her mother and the process that she went through to find the appropriate space. So I think that would be helpful for all of us, as we all, at some point in the future, we may become seniors. There's a nasty rumor floating around out there that we will at some point become seniors. And so it's something that we might have to consider for ourselves. So that's the first one. The second and most important is June 15th at 1 o'clock at Sage is the strawberry tea. And we will have our usual friends, Northern Heart, singing, and just do a very, very brief tribute to our friend Jeff Bovey, who was really started the space at Sage. So please do join us for the strawberry tea. Everybody is welcome. You don't have to register. I'll probably buy food for thousands, so I have no idea how that's going to turn out, but we're just going to hope for the best. So that, and then also want to plug our movie night on the June 22nd at 7 p.m. Tain't Nobody's Business, a movie about blues divas of the 1920s with a panel discussion following. That's at Metro Cinema. You'll be seeing posters from these things come to you. And so really, with that, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. And really thank Punch and Amanda so much for your presentation. Very good information, and I think a lot that is valuable for a lot of people here. So with that, I am going to create a breakout room as I talk here and try to do this, and so that we can just do a quick wrap up. But aside from that, thank you everybody for attending today, and we hope to see you next week. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Aging with Pride.